There we go.
Okay, everybody. My name is Tor Johnson. I'm the co-chair of leadership development for District 12. Welcome to our part 3 leadership development workshop. Tonight, our presenters are Bettina Schempp from Corvallis, Vicki Wilson, who's an affiliate member of District 12, and Janet Baker, who's from Campbell River, British Columbia. And of course, Debbie McBee, our governor, is joining us as well and being our slide turner.
Okay, can everyone see?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Righty.
So in previous workshops, we've been talking about how to be an effective committee chair or officer and leading with impact. And tonight, it's about leadership for personal growth, building your leadership skills, effective communication, utilizing mentors, open forum and coaching, and additional sources. And being a leader is a personal journey. It's honing your skills. Whether you think that you're a leader or not, you are, simply because you're an Altruisan. And so it's that continuous thing. And, I've certainly learned a lot in the last couple of years. While I'm a great behind the scenes person, I am not a good public speaking person. But, all of these workshops have given me those chances to hone my skills. So we're going to start out with Bettina tonight.
Sorry, my thing is not advancing here. A second. There's always some technical difficulty. Whoop, went too far. Okay.
So what we're first going to talk about is leadership skills that we are developing. And one of them is that we influence others in our leadership. We also allow others to work with our vision, and we can empower and we can delegate. And I start off with the leading is influencing. Just by being a leader, we influence others because we represent our beliefs in terms of who we are and what we want to achieve. So leadership is really a social influence process where we maximize the power of others towards achievement of a goal that we share. And we can see some key elements in this definition. So there is social influence. It's not authority, it's not power, it's not power over people. It's really about trying to convince and influence others to be with us on that team. And because leadership is with others, it also means that we have a team that we work with. And we're not really mentioning any personality traits or attributes or even a title, because leadership can be not just by position, because it can just be by style and how effective we are. So when we are leaders, we generally have a goal that we work with.
Bettina, I'm sorry I hit advance, and so I got one slide ahead of you. Sorry.
Yeah. So as a leader, on a project, on a committee, at the club, at the district, at the international level, we want to take time to develop that vision that we share with our team. And if we look at our district, if you look at your own district, you generally work towards a vision, what your Altrusa club, what your district, what you want to achieve. And the same if you are in a business or if you're in another group of people. And when we have that vision, then we create a plan of how we will make that vision reality. And we'll identify the people that we want to have on our team. And what we do there is not just people like us, but people with the right skills and the potential to develop those skills that help us achieve that plan. And with any leadership perspective, we don't have all the answers. We will be open to ideas and input. We don't go in there knowing everything and having everything set in place, but we're using our team that we are the leader of to bring the ideas, the input, and then work together. And as with anything, with a job, with a committee, with our clubs, with district, with international, we also have to have fun, especially when we're volunteers. That fun is there. But I also believe, even a job, if it's not fun, then the pay probably isn't enough to make us show up over a long time. So as a leader, you have different roles. And I've already talked about the inspiration, the vision, but also motivating and connecting people. How often have you come onto a committee and you didn't know each other, or people on the committee didn't know each other, but in the process, you connected people to inside or outside of your group. You also, as a leader, have to communicate that vision. It doesn't communicate itself. We all know that words mean different things to different people. So we have to illustrate it. We have to give examples. We have to build it out so that everyone on our team can see the bigger picture when they work on the minute things. As a leader, too, you help your team to set priorities and then help them accomplish those goals. We all know that we often have more things on our plate than we can realistically do. So we have to sort the ones that are priorities from the ones that are maybe nice to have or could be done later. And that's part of your leadership, is helping the team set priorities. And it's not necessarily you who does it, but you allow the team to have those conversations. Later on, we'll talk about delegating and empowering, which is a big piece of being a leader. One of the things I often learned in president training is that once you become the club president, you're not the doer anymore. You're the one who delegates, the one that empowers, who is in the background, so the others can shine and take their roles. And that's a leadership role, is delegating and empowering, and you going from the doer to that other person or persona or role in that time. Running an effective meeting is also an important part of leadership. If meetings are not planned, or if meetings run over, or people talk over each other, that can destroy a group dynamic. So being effective in running meetings, allowing everyone to have a say, staying on time, having an agenda, and achieving goals through the meeting as well, will help the people on your team to feel those meetings are helpful, they take the team forward, and they're time well spent. Another part of being a leader is to keep your members informed. Communication is a very difficult thing at times. We communicate via phone, by email, but it's really important to think about, what do the members of your team need to know, and then how am I communicating that so everyone's on the same page. We know in our clubs that committees work their own thing, but the rest of the club still should know what these committees are doing. So keeping the members informed so they know what the literacy committee is doing or what other committees are doing, even if they're not involved. So that information flow that you facilitate is a big part of your leadership. And then celebrating successes and creating accountability. Last time, we talked about what motivates people and how to motivate, and what people's languages of appreciation are. And again, celebrating success takes that into account. And we wanted to not just slog away, we want to also celebrate what we're achieving, both in little steps, but also in the bigger goals that we achieve together. And when some members might not get done what they said they would do, then you're really working with them to encourage them, so that everyone can take accountability for what they're doing, but you also, the buck stops at the top. You're helping them be accountable, and you help resolve issues when things go slow. And as leaders, we also create our future leaders. That's always part of every club, saying, who's going to be the one who takes over from me? If we start projects and then we don't take care of succession planning or handing it over, then maybe some of the impact that we made initially is actually diluted, and we don't achieve as much as we want to. I think I'll do those two still. So there's 11 ways that someone identified to grow into an effective leader. The first one is really spending time making observations of what others do and how they do it. We can glean so much from seeing how other leaders do things well, and also how they might not do things so well. So we say, oh yeah, I don't, this didn't really fly well. I'd probably avoid doing that, as well as, when they did this worked so beautifully, I want to put that into my toolkit, because leadership really is a toolkit, because leadership is not a blanket way of managing people, but it's really responding to the individual needs of those we work with. And we need to know what our blind sides are. I know that there's things that I don't do really well. I know that I always might be going at 200 miles an hour when someone else might need to talk things through. And I'm just like nodding my head saying, why is it taking them so long to understand this? So my flaw might be, I need to slow down. I need to give everyone time to think it through. And so we need to understand what our flaws are. And you probably all know most of flaws already, but also in leadership, someone else might point out something that you do really well, but also something that might be in the way of you being a great leader. And constructive criticism is what allows us to get that insight into the flaws that we don't even see. It's like those ums and ahs in your public speaking that you don't hear till someone points them out to you. And it's the same for leadership, that if someone points out to you that maybe you interrupt someone or you come forward too forcefully, you can think about that and you can modify your behavior as a leader. Definitely learning, growing from past mistakes. I don't mind making mistakes. I just don't want to do them twice. That's always my thing. I want to avoid the really painful ones and the ones that hurt people, but I will make mistakes, and learning from them is what really takes us forward.
Hey, Bettina, can I jump in there for a minute?
Yeah. Yes.
I also want to make the point that as a leader, you kind of set the culture of whatever you're leading, whether it's your club or a committee or a district, and tying into giving permission for your members in whatever group you're in to try things and to make mistakes it's an important part of leadership, because a lot of people and in a lot of work environments and other environments, they don't want you to make mistakes, but actually you can become stronger and better in making those mistakes, and you as a leader can set the tone to allow that and to learn from that and to become, for your group to become better or your organization to become better by permitting accidents to happen and talking through them.
Yeah, Debbie, that's really important. I have one of the words that I try to avoid in my language is the word should. You should have done this, because that's a word that really indicates to people they can't make mistakes. They should have known. They should have known better. They should have used this. And the word should can be really detrimental in conversations and communication, because it sort of takes away that mistakes are allowed, and we're all human and we learn from our mistakes.
And if I can join in on that conversation, one of the best ways you can allow your coworkers or your team to be able to admit when they've made a mistake or have had a problem is if you as a leader can be bold enough to admit when you've made a mistake. And by your being able to admit you've made mistakes allows them the courage to admit it when they've made a mistake.
Yeah, that's a great example of those example of those with experience. If you see a leader who's an accomplished leader acknowledge a mistake, say, yeah, that's a sign of a good leader. They lead with humility and they lead with accepting their own mistakes. Yeah, thanks, Vicky. Challenging ourselves also is part of leadership, that we stretch our wings. We do things that might feel uncomfortable, that we haven't tried before, that we, for example, if we're more of an introvert, that we make that phone call to someone that we want to connect our club with and challenge ourselves to go outside. And we all have different things that challenge us. and just try something else.
Bettina, can I add into that too?
Yep.
I worked under a leader once who I had not verbally heard someone say this, but it was very interesting and I haven't forgotten. She assigned people to committees to be on a committee that they were not as familiar with so that they would grow as a person, not in a way that became so uncomfortable that they couldn't handle it, but sometimes we have in Altrusa people who stay with the same things and they become very good at it. And she was very intentional about talking with people saying, I know you're good at this, but I would like to have you work on that. I know you haven't done it before. Are you willing to do that? And I thought it's an interesting opportunity for growth as a person and an interesting way to lead and to grow your members of your team when we tend to stay with what we're comfortable with.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Here we go. And it goes on. Investing in our personal growth with education and coaches. I hear people really appreciate if they have a coach. And a coach can be an informal coach, but it can also be someone that you seek out who has skills or experience that you try and build. Education is also about reading books, about listening to podcasts. So any of that, it's investment in time, but in these days it's more often time than money because training has become so online. But it's also seeking out people that have skills and experience that you really want to build in yourself. And networks are a big piece. As Altrusans, we are networkers. We often say that our clubs are generally places where we meet people that we might not meet in our professional environments or just in our personal lives, but they allow us to get networks and connections to other parts in our community and elements of our community that will enrich our own lives. I always think of it as we give and we receive so much back. And networks allow us to connect with so many people who in the end also connect over different goals that they have for the community we live in. Developing, growing our emotional intelligence is part of what we do as leaders, and that really relates to us understanding how other people feel, think, and believe, because not everything is expressed. Our language is so different and we can't read anyone's mind. So emotional intelligence is all about that connection, intentional connection, and questioning and interest and curiosity about other people. And if we have that curiosity, then we develop that emotional intelligence that allows us to connect with people, not just with the brain, but also where they are, what their values are, where their current emotions are, what their challenges are, and how they then bring themselves into our teams when we're leaders. Change is a big part of leadership. I guess if in some areas there's less change, but I would say change is so big today that as a leader, we have to be prepared for change and we have to be able to move on, evolve, change, adapt, because that's the only way for ourselves, for our families, for our groups to survive and thrive. Change is just a constant. And as a leader, they often say that it's not the doing, it's this progressing towards our vision. We might not always get to the end point, but we want to know that we're on the right track, that we're not on a treadmill, that we're not standing still or going backwards. So part of leadership is also finding ways to measure that what you went out to achieve is what you're actually achieving, and helping your team to do that too, tracking that they haven't just spent 50 hours doing something, but in the process of those 15 hours, we have made a difference with people in our community. We have finished a goal. We have changed someone's life. We have raised money. So tracking that what we do also meets what we went out to do is part of leadership, allowing the team that we lead to measure that. And then when we also track progress and lessons learned, we can celebrate. We can celebrate the success, we can celebrate the progress, and we can use the lessons learned for, say, if we do an event the second time, we say, oh, this went really well and we'd like to do this. So we track and write down what we might want to do differently the next time. So that's part of leadership, is that tracking. And I should probably hand over to someone else. Vicki, do you want to have a go?
Oh, I will. Now that I've got leadership all memorized, I'll go on with delegating. We roll with the punches. Delegation is the act of assigning authority to another person to perform their separate tasks. You're not in a dictatorship where you're saying you will do this and I'm going to watch over every step you make and make sure that it's done the way I want it to. Delegating is giving them permission to take over a project as completely theirs, and you will assist them as needed, but it is their project to work on as they want to, and that give them the confidence to know that they're in charge of the project, that you're going to not be overseeing every step they take. The ultimate responsibility for it remains with the leader who delegated, but that should be their role should be simply as a backup to assist when there are issues. When you delegate a specific assignment, you're trusting that person to be able to do as much of the job as they can without your assistance, so that you can oversee the project as a whole. But you're giving the reins to them, and completely to them. An effective delegation is a strategic leadership skill that empowers your team members, fosters their skill development, improves decision-making, enhances collaboration, engagement, and innovation, and gives them the feeling of leadership to grow their own skills and let them succeed in life. And that's your job as a leader, is to help others succeed. Reasons that some leaders avoid delegating: it's hard to give up control. Yes, it can be, but if you don't give up control, then you're a team of one and you have nobody to back you up and support you. You're all out there on your own little one-man island all by yourself, and that will never succeed in an organization. I know what I want to do, so it's easier to do it myself. That doesn't help your team grow, not only in their confidence in you, but also in their confidence in themselves. It takes too much time to delegate. In the long run, it will take less time to delegate and let someone else do the tasks than doing them all. 5 people working on different projects will take 1/5 of the time of one person. And you're also assisting their personal growth when you allow them to do it. Effective communication is one of the most difficult things as a leader, simply because you may or may not be speaking the exact same language as your team. But you have to remember to actively listen to what your team does and be a part of the team rather than the only part of the team. And you sometimes have to worry about managing difficult conversations. There are times when you will be disagreeing with other team members. You need to be able to hold those conversations without the emotions of, I'd hate this, or this is a bad idea. Sit and consider and possibly have the difficult conversation of telling someone else that some way that you're going to be moving in a slightly different direction, and you appreciate their work. And that may be something to delve into the future. But for this moment, we're going to be heading in this direction. So being able to manage those difficult conversations is really hard. And we'll go into that a little bit more. The active listening, be cognitive, pay attention to all the information, both the explicit and the implicit that you're receiving. Comprehend and integrate that information into whatever everything else that you've learned about the project or about the task. But make sure you listen to what they're saying and don't let it go in one ear and out the other. Really concentrate on what they're trying to get at. Stay calm and unemotional in the project during the conversations. We don't want to get into a shooting match with or a shouting match with people. That doesn't help. Being sarcastic or saying mean words does not help. You need to set your emotions aside and concentrate on the good of the project, the good of the team, and making sure that you don't make any of your team members feel hurt by any conversations, because then they will leave the team and you don't have that person and that knowledge to work with. Behavioral, we need to convey with interest and comprehensions, both verbally and non-verbally, nodding your head when you're hearing something positive, showing, reinforcing with your words that you agree with what they're saying, and or they're not agreeing, but be in a positive light when you're saying things as best you can. One of the best ways to show that you're actively listening is to repeat their words back to them. So what I heard you say was, it's a great way. Bounce back that you understand what they're saying, not just that you heard their words, but you understand the meaning behind their words, what they're really trying to accomplish and get across to you. And don't put it in your own words unless you absolutely need to, because if you're the leader, this is their project. This should be done in their way, using their terminology, their thought process. And the only way you would use your own words would be just to say, this is what I heard you say. This is what I think you mean. Can you confirm that I understand you correctly? There's also nonverbal cues that you're listening. Eye contact, attentive posture, lean forward to ensure that you're listening to them, nodding. All these nonverbal cues will help them to know that you're paying attention to them and you're really comprehending what they're saying, as opposed to just being there and giving them, giving them your time and not your energy. Pay attention to their nonverbal cues. If you see people that are leaning back and they just don't seem to be involved, they're not paying attention, that's also a verbal cue that you need to be concentrating on to see their reaction to you in addition to the way you're reacting to them. It's a two-way street. Leadership is definitely a two-way street. We're going to flip the slides forward. Oh, there we go. Ask more questions than you think you need to. This is a hard one, because how do you know what questions, if you've asked everything you need, what other questions are there to ask? But maybe you can prompt them. Is there something else I'm missing? Something I haven't thought of that you want to bring up? Make sure that you haven't overlooked everything. And as a leader, it's very possible that you're going to overlook something. That's part of, oops, I made a mistake. I forgot something. Reach out to your team and say, I'm human. Is there something I'm missing? Minimize your distractions. Don't let the fact that you're working on 5 or 6 things, when you're in a meeting or you're talking with somebody, concentrate one-on-one about that conversation and don't get distracted by something else that might be happening in the background. And feel free to acknowledge your shortcomings. We are humans. We're not gods. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We forget things. It's okay to admit that to people. They're there to support you as a team just as much as you're there to support them as a team. And if you don't quite understand what they're saying, ask them to say it again, ask them to rephrase it, but make sure you have that good line of communication and that you're able to say yourself when you've done something wrong or you've missed something or you don't have the knowledge. Please teach me or tell me what to do, because I don't understand this situation 100%. You know this better than I do. You take the lead on where we should go forward with this. And don't rehearse what you're going to say, because what you say needs to be a response to what they're saying and what they have done. And if you rehearse in advance, you're not listening to them and you're not responding to them. You're off in your own little world, being your little dictator. This is what we're going to do. And that's not teamwork. And that's not a good leader. A leader needs to make sure that they listen to their team, work with their team, and then respond to what they've learned. Monitor your reactions. Again, don't be the one who shows your true emotions. If you disagree with something, that's fine to disagree, but don't be insulting people. Try and keep your decisions based strictly on what's best for the project, not what's best for your personal life. And do more repetition, pay attention to your breathing. You don't want to respond in a way that will cause the other person to be disengaged by insulting them or belittling. Just be positive in all your words. Listening is a complex job, oh, definitely, with many different sub-top tasks, and it's possible to be good at some and bad at others. So try and evaluate your skills and concentrate on being an active listener and a good communicator, and repeat things as needed so that you make sure that you're both understanding the same thing and working towards the same goal.
And maybe at this time, maybe someone has an example where they felt someone was really listening to them versus when, it didn't happen. Can you just think about a time, any of you, where, yeah, I was active listening, I was taking the pauses, I was slowing down, or when someone just clearly wasn't listening? Just think about that in your mind. How did it feel? What reactions did you have? Because good active listeners really make you feel like you're the center of their universe at the time they listen to you.
I will share something from my past.
Mm-hmm.
I dearly loved the owner of the last company I worked with. And when he was redesigning the building, we moved into a new location. There was only one office in the entire building that had a door, and it was his. All of his senior vice presidents, all of his senior staff, they had offices, but no doors, because he wanted to make sure that he communicated that the idea that these people were open to hearing you anytime you wanted. You could just walk into their office. There was no door to stop you. They were there to listen to you. And it was a very good way of making sure that the lines of communication were open and they were actively going to listen to you.
Yeah, it's a very physical way of saying, I want to hear what you're saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Vicki. I can do this part. Part of being a good communicator and leader is about managing difficult conversations or important conversations. And I've done a training about that before. So for some of you, that is a repetition, but most conversations are not just the words, the facts that we're talking about. That's the part, that's the obvious part. And sometimes we don't even agree on the facts when we have a conversation because we might have experienced the situation differently. But below that are also the feelings we have about what happened. Where we excited, where we disappointed, where we sidelined, where we surprised. And so feelings are always part of a conversation as well. And then the third part is about the identity. What's at stake? And that comes really to who we think we are. If we are a very detailed person, we are really proud of getting things correct, and someone is threatening our identity about being a trustworthy, detail-oriented, accurate person, then that identity in the conversation might be the one that we feel the strongest about, and we might not even hear the rest because we're emotionally very involved. If we're not emotionally involved, then our identity isn't at stake, and we might feel looser and we might feel more relaxed in the conversation. But the more we feel is at stake about who we are, if we're lovable, if we're intelligent, if we're competent, if we're a good person, the more of that is involved in the conversation, the more difficult and important it becomes, and the more we feel is at risk, and where our active listening might be not as easy to do if we feel threatened or if we feel attacked. So when we plan for a conversation that is more difficult because someone might have, think about what is the purpose of this conversation. Do we want to agree on the facts? Do we want to share our feelings and we get some agreement, or hear each other and make up about a difficult situation? What do we really hope to achieve? And then we can't ignore the history of what's happened before. Sometimes agencies or individuals or groups have something that happened before, and because there is a joy or a grievance before, this conversation might be jaded by what we bring to the conversation, because we already come with judgment over how open someone is, or how judgmental someone is, how good someone is. And so this comes into the conversation. So having an idea of what the environment is in a club, in a group, in your team is important. And then it is what's at stake. And it's not just for you, it's also for the other people. Do they have a self-image of themselves that seems to be threatened by what we're discussing? And if that is, then we want to address that conversation in a different way. So we recognize, acknowledge that they might feel attacked by what might be happening. And because we know that, and that's often happens in mediation, is a technique that we use for difficult conversations. And that's where a big part of a difficult conversation is to build rapport and trust first, to really sit there first and find what connects us. We all love kids. We all want our community to do better community. So if we say have a difficulty with the dog barking in our neighbor's yard, so we can agree on that we want to have a nice neighborhood and we all want to live our own lives and not be disturbed. So we want to create that rapport and trust first before we have that difficult conversation. So we find the common ground, which we also want to do as a world and as a country and as a state and as a community. We want to first know what we have in common, and establishing rapport and trust and taking time is what does that. And we do that by showing empathy. We're validating each other's emotions. When Vicky talked about emotions as part of active listening, watching out for emotions and watching out for the nonverbal cues, we want to acknowledge that we have feelings, and that people might have been upset or people might have felt ignored, and acknowledge those feelings. And we don't talk about the intent, we talk about the impact when we do that. We acknowledge that someone has been impacted a certain way, even if we didn't intend to harm them. They might feel a certain way, and by giving empathy, validating emotions, acknowledging feelings, we're validating the impact we might have had unintentionally. And that again creates empathy, that creates good listening. And then we want to see what are the underlying needs that everyone wants to have out of this conflict resolution. Do we want to have peace? Do we want to move forward? Do you want to do things differently? But also underlying need is also for acknowledgement. When someone says to you, I don't feel like you trust I can do this, or I don't feel like you think I can do this, then that's their need for appreciation and their need for being seen for an important part of a team. So in mediation and nonviolent communication, we talk about the difference between thoughts and feelings, and that's why in mediation we acknowledge feelings, and then we work on what do we want to achieve. And this is just a little table that distinguishes between feelings, that are emotions and reactions, and then thoughts, which are the ideas. And sometimes thoughts masquerade as feelings and vice versa. And those are the next slide. So when we want to do constructive communication, we first observe what happened. Then we can talk about how we feel about it, and we don't assume that we know the feelings of someone else. We look at our underlying needs as parties, and then we might ask someone, when you did this, I felt really disrespected. I would like you to do this differently. So this is really a sequence that we can use when we feel that something happened that we don't like, that we can correct it without blaming someone, without using the word should on someone, you should have done, but really just saying, how did it impact me, and what can I do different? Can you do differently to help me feel differently in the future? I think that's all we had on. Oh yeah, so good communication skills help us in really all aspects of our life. With our family, with our friends, we all know how we can have misunderstandings at home, but also in the workplace and in our group, in our clubs, in our teams, wherever we are, in our churches. And we really create a more peaceful world if we know how to communicate better, because the misunderstandings, the judgments go away when we are able to step back, when we can actively listen, but we can also resolve any misunderstanding with good communication skills. I think now it's Janet's.
Yes. I'm going to talk a little bit about mentorship and learn what makes a good mentor, and learn about the benefits if you yourself are a mentor, and the benefits to your protege as well. Like if you're a mentor, you use your personal experience and you can offer someone a wide range of your skills. I'm finding that I've been in the club now for quite a while and done a few of the major roles in the club, and I'm called upon a lot for my experience and knowledge. And I'm finding that it's really benefiting we've had so many new members in the last little while that it's really benefiting some of the new members. Currently, I'm mentoring our treasurer and helping her a bit with some of the difficulties that she's had and some of the learning she's had. But the other thing that's important with mentorship is learning the value of your wisdom, and learning how to share your wisdom without taking over. I think that's really important, letting them learn on their own. So guiding them if they need it, and certainly being there for them at all times. But and non-judgmentally, that's really important, to address any questions from the protege, but step aside, as it says on the slide, and let them do the job themselves, and just be there if they need you, because they're going to, because it's a new job, especially one of the more difficult jobs. So treasurer was one of those. You have to also be very supportive and reinforce what they're doing well. Provide guidance when they face challenges, as they will in a brand new job. And sometimes they just need you to listen to them, to let them go on about what's going on in the job and what they're having difficulty with. And sometimes they need you to tell them. So they may benefit from hearing the ways that the mentor, myself, and as a treasurer, overcame obstacles. I'm finding that too. So you need to be able to create positive and successful outcomes for the treasurer or for whoever you are mentoring, and provide them with unconditional support. That's an important thing. You need to focus on your similarities rather than your differences. You need to show respect for their unique experiences and their background, and build a positive rapport with them. Ask questions and find out what they really need from you and what their goal is in the particular role that they're taking on. Listening, you can note the differences, but focus on what you have in common. And tailor your feedback to what the particular role is, and try to coordinate with their own goals and their personality. Not always easy to do if you've got your own that you're bringing into it, but definitely try to do that. Be prepared. That's important. Be prepared for your protege. If you are trying to help them with something, be there on time, and be prepared for them. And ensure consistent communication. Make sure you're available for them when they need you. Sometimes the mentor might need to be able to provide additional opportunities for a protege for mentorship. Demonstrate your commitment by being present when the protege asks for that support, always.
And can I add in something
Sure.
on that? One example of this last point is like Julie Livingston is going to become governor in May. And so in the past year on our President's Council meetings, a couple times I've asked her to run the President's Council meeting. We've developed the agenda together, but then I turn it over to her to run it. Or within a club setting, a lot of times a vice president may be the program chair and introduce the speakers, where they don't have to run the full meeting, but they get exposed to certain parts of leadership, excuse me, and taking on, trying out some opportunities to get comfortable with things before they move into a role. So that's just an extra example of what you were just talking about.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. The relationship between a mentor and a protege is definitely mutually beneficial. Both learn new ideas, both see different perspectives, and both find new methods of approaching people, topic, situations. I've found it to be really beneficial because it does help you to become aware and look at things from somebody else's point of view. Just because you understand something really well doesn't mean they will, and they understand it from a different point of view. So it's definitely beneficial for the mentor as well as the mentee. You can certainly gain experience with one-on-one communication, with counseling, and with coaching, and it can help you be more confident to help you guide the next person that you might be mentoring with whatever it might be. I think that's it for mentoring.
Yes. So, there's plenty of resources out there for leadership. One is the Club President's Handbook for any of you who are incoming presidents or past presidents or current. It covers leadership, planning and evaluating, presiding over your meeting or your committee meetings, working with the board of directors, your club finances, membership development. If you have an Astra club within your club, Altrusa in the public eye, communications, files and reports, awards, and the International Foundation.
Cora, I'm going to go back a slide because I think it skipped. Yes, it skipped
Okay.
our open forum opportunity. I apologize.
No problem. So does anybody have any topics they want to discuss, things they'd like to run by everybody? Experiences,
Let me
comments?
I'd like to
stop
share
screen
something.
sharing for a minute.
As I said before, I really loved the owner of the company I worked for. And I told you about his attitude about being available to people. There were no doors in the building, well, other than restrooms, etc. But no offices had doors other than his. He also made it very clear when I was hired on that we did not call ourselves employers or employees, because that implied that he was an employer that had a status above ours. We were all associates. He was an associate just the same as we were an associate. And it lent very well to that feeling of we are a big team. He was not a dictator with us doing whatever he said. We worked together very closely at all times as a team. And I worked with that company for 30 years until I retired, because he gave that whole company that feeling of, I may be the leader technically, but we all work together as a team. We're all the same. I am no better than you are simply because my name is on the papers, the ownership papers. We work together and we make decisions together, and everybody's input is just as valuable as anybody else's. And he's been gone for 15 years, passed away 15 years ago, and I still think about him even after I'm long since retired, because that concept of leadership was so overwhelming, so outstanding, that it just made a permanent impression on me. And I would encourage everybody to try and lead with that type of a concept, that I am not any better than you are just because I'm the team leader. We're all the same. I'm just going to do the paperwork, and you guys can make the plans and go forward. I will help you however I need to, but we're all in this together.
Great.
And I think as leaders, there's always challenges. I run a large nonprofit, and there's leadership challenges for me every day. It's new things that I have to step back from and think, why is someone upset, or how can I motivate this person? Because we're all so different. We show up in different ways too. One day someone's really relaxed and they're just really positive, and the next day something's happened and they find it really hard to be motivated. They take any comment you make, maybe what you think, the wrong way, but that's how they hear it. The hearing is different. One day positive, one day it's not so positive. So leadership challenges come up every day, and I think the key thing that we're trying to convey is active listening will allow you to just have that grace and have that open heart and mind for the whole person that's in front of you. They are a person. They're not just a thing, someone who does a task. They're a complete person. And leadership means that we can show up for them as a full person, and we can adapt when they might need a different way of working with them.
I think understanding how someone communicates as well, and I go back to the book that Tor had shown us, talked about in the fall workshop, where the only one I can remember is peacock, and I think there was a dove, but it's some people respond differently to emotion, and some people need facts, and some people need a little bit of both. So I think I have an example of when I was working, I had a boss that he and I continually butted heads. We fought all the time. And it wasn't until my husband actually took me aside and said, Janet, you're the problem. And at the same time, I happened to take a communication course, which told me about different ways of people communicating, how people communicate. And I learned he was a facts person and I'm an emotional person. So I would go to him and say, I feel like this. And he didn't want to hear that. He wanted to hear the facts. So as soon as I went to him and said, this is what I believe, this is why, we got along like a house of fire. And he actually recommended me for a cruise. So, it learning how someone communicates and what's important to them is a really, really key factor in getting along with people, I think.
Absolutely. I recently spoke to a gal, and she was in a meeting and she felt shamed. And as soon as she felt that, her whole energy changed, and what was then presented from that point on in her mind, just because of the energy, it totally turned around from what it actually was being said. And then when I said, well, here's actually what was said, and she's like, I just didn't even hear that. I was so upset and I felt so negative at that point. So energy is a real important thing in our communication.
Definitely.
I'd
We all love
also-
that book, Tor.
I'd also like to jump in because this particular session is about developing ourselves as leaders. And I want to use myself as an example. Back when I was in college, in high school and before that, I was a Girl Scout. And so when I went to college, I got involved in a bunch of different things. And for Lord only knows what reason, I decided to volunteer as a assistant Girl Scout leader or a brownie troop while I was a sophomore in college. And I didn't have any kids or anything like that. I just thought that would be a cool thing to do. So I went to become an assistant Brownie troop leader, and those are the littlest, girls. And the troop leader, as soon as I joined a meeting, they were partway into their school year, she quit. So all of a sudden, I'm the leader of this group of 15 little 5-year-olds or whatever brownies are. And it was a disaster. Number one, I was a college kid, but number two, I had not led a group of children. Now, if it was 20 years later and I had 3 kids like I'd already had, my approaches would have been very different. And I remember at a meeting at a certain point just sitting down and crying because I did not have the skill set to manage a whole bunch of little girls on my own doing the activities we were supposed to do with no parental help. And so one of the moms ended up coming in early to the meeting that day that I was crying and realized what was going on. And she then got some other parents to come and be kind of co-leaders with me since the actual leader had quit and I was a college kid. So what's interesting, and the reason I share that is I was young and had limited skills then, but you grow your skills by taking on things you don't know how to do. And so I did learn some things from that. And I took on multiple other leadership roles over time. And, since I moved back to Pendleton, which was 30 years ago now, I've done different community roles. And even within Altrusa, you can tier up, you can start at different levels. And so you can help oversee a project. And then you can become a committee chair. And then you may decide to become a board member, but not an officer. And then you may decide you've got the courage to go ahead and be an officer and work through a couple different chairs or leadership roles, officer roles within a club to become a president. And most people are pretty nervous becoming a club president in the beginning because it's a whole new level of responsibility and you don't necessarily know what you're doing, but you always have mentors available to you, like Janet was talking about. You have past presidents, you have past committee chair members, you in Altrusa have district people. There's many layers of support that you can call on. And then again, within Altrusa, if you jump up to a district level, you can serve on a district committee, you can be a district chair, you can eventually serve on the district board, and you may become a district governor, which brings on all these other layers of responsibility, but also of personal growth. And then within Altrusa, you can serve on an international committee, and not necessarily in this order. You can serve on different things in different ways and different times, or on the international board, and you may become the president of the international organization. And I think it's important for us as leaders on whatever level we're on to see the potential in other people, to find some of their areas of weakness and help them get exposed to something that they may not feel comfortable stepping up and doing, so that and support them through that, so that they learn and grow and realize they can do it. And all these little wins give you confidence to then keep taking on other roles and applying your newfound knowledge in a new way to become stronger and help your organization become stronger. So I really do honestly think Altrusa is an amazing leadership development organization, and we're never in it on our own. And there are lots of ways to grow as a person and to lean on other people to share advice. I reach out to all kinds of people all the time to seek ideas and support and to navigate issues that come up because we're not in it on our own. So just wanted to share that.
And I can piggyback on that as well, because I have been in Altrusa, this will be my 5th year. And I have had I've had the honor of dealing with multiple clubs across our region and actually being able to go and visit those clubs, see how they function versus how our club functions. So I'm able to take some things from each of those experiences back to our club and say, hey, maybe we might want to consider this, or would you all consider doing this activity? Another thing when it comes to like a lot of the projects and stuff that we do, we often have different people that suggest things. And sometimes you get emotionally, we're talking about emotions, because it's like, well, everything I put on the table, you don't want to do. And you get a lot of pushback from some of the more seasoned members that have been around in the club that's like, well, we've never done that way. Well, that's kind of the thing. You need to be able to learn how to adapt. But then the hardest struggle for me was dealing with trying to determine what was actual, emotional criticism versus constructive criticism. And that is a tough thing to try to decipher when you're dealing with, that type of a mindset of, well, we've never done this before. So.
Good points, Coretta.
Yeah, that's, we've never done this before. It's probably one of the hardest ones to deal with, especially because there's club dynamics and it can shut down a conversation. So I found sometimes in the meeting, I have to let it go. And then I have to talk about it outside the meeting with the person who might have made their comment. Because there's these really difficult dynamics at times in a club meeting, because someone can just shut down a conversation by saying, "Oh, we've tried this before. We've tried this before. This won't work. We've tried this before," and it can shut down, newer members. It can shut down conversations, and it's one of those really complicated ones because I think when I was younger, I would just talk back because that's what I would do, but it didn't help. Now I might use the other strategy of just having several conversations outside the meeting that sort of go back to tell me more, that tell me more. That is easier to do one-on-one than it is maybe in a club meeting. But these are complicated situations, and I think we've probably all been in them more than once.
One of the things that came out, I don't know if it was in a president's council meeting or some other meeting, but we've had a couple clubs on the we don't do it that way or that's never worked before, have taken an approach of, you know what, let's just try it for 3 or 4 months and see how it goes, because we can always go back to how we've always done it, but let's just give it a chance and evaluate. And so that's another technique of sometimes people who really object to change, who have a hard time and think everything's perfect as it is. If you give it a limited time thing, they may support trying a new thing, and your club may find it turns out great, or, maybe it doesn't, and you do go back to how it was.
And I think, especially in fundraising, I heard recently in a nonprofit roundtable that every year in your fundraising efforts, you need to change just a component of your event to keep it fresh, to keep it new, and keep it exciting so people keep coming back. If you don't, then you're just putting a timeline on how long that's going to survive.
Those are all very good points. Thank you all.
Does anyone have any situations that have come up that they want to talk through and share, or anything that they're not sure of for a future role you might be headed into or considering, that you'd like to get some ideas back on? Yeah, Rebecca.
Yeah, I would really like to get some feedback from people on this one situation. I am the chair of the service committee, and a new member, relatively new member, has come up with an idea for a project that I don't think has been well thought through, and I can see a lot of potential serious problems that can happen. But the other members of the club are concerned about encouraging this member. She's new, she's enthusiastic, she's got an idea. We don't want to put a roadblock in front of her that might discourage her. So let's just go ahead and support her idea and fund her project. So it's become almost sort of like a group think thing where everybody's agreeing, yes, we're going to do this. And yet I can see that there's going to be a lot of problems. And I don't really know how to approach that in a way that's constructive and doesn't discourage this young new member. So any feedback would be great.
Does your club have an assessment of a new project, like a checklist saying if we have a new project, we'll figure out how much it costs, how many people will it need, what else, what do we need to get it started?
Yes, we actually have a template, a form. All of that information
Yeah.
is supposed to be provided, and then a decision is made after it's been reviewed. But the attitude of the club members is that we should not use that. We should put that aside, because the most important thing is not to discourage this new member. So let's just go ahead anyway and support the project. So I'm a little unsure how to proceed and how to get people to think this through a little more.
What's the downfall if it doesn't succeed? What happens if it doesn't succeed?
Well, it's a lot of money that the club could potentially lose on an activity that may, this involves giving money for this project, and if it hasn't been thought through, that money could be wasted, and I don't want to see that happen.
Well, then I would make every effort to make sure everybody gets involved and ensure that it doesn't fail. How are you going to know it's going to fail if you don't try? And the fact that she's new to the club doesn't mean that it's maybe not a good idea. Have you tried something like this before?
No.
Okay, well, I just don't think you don't know whether it's going to fail or not until you try.
I would toss in though, especially since it involves money, we have a fiduciary responsibility to be monitoring our funds and to be intentional in what we do and thoughtful in what we do. And so you can check your club policies and see if there's anything written about the process, as Bettina mentioned, on when a new project is being discussed. So within the Pendleton Club, what we do, because we've started all kinds of new projects and they come from someone's idea. So we have a committee talk through it. I'm going to use the CARE project as an example. 2 of us thought about that. We talked about it within our service committee on this is the concept. And then the committee got back to, okay, flush it out more. How are we going to fundraise for this? How many people are going to be involved? And we do have a kind of a project evaluation template for deciding on projects. And so we filled that out. We put information into it. We realized we hadn't thought about this part and that part. We brainstormed a little more. We took it back to the committee, and the committee's like, yeah, let's take this to the club. So then we took it, we presented it at a club meeting, because in our club, the entire club votes on any new project and anything that requires funds over a certain dollar amount. For us, it used to be anything over $300. And for that, then the club discussed it. We fine-tuned it a little bit more, took it back to the committee, came back to the club and said, this is how we want it to look. And it was approved by the full club. And so I would toss out, Rebecca, that maybe you say, we think this is a great idea. We just need to refine it a little more to make sure that it's successful, and have a couple of those people, not just the one new person, but whoever's going to be serving on that project committee, work with her to refine it a little more, to give it a little more depth, and come back to your club for discussion and vote, so that you can then move forward and give it a try. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But that at least may strengthen some of the legs of the project to stand on for success.
Great suggestion.
Looks like, I don't know who put their hand up first, Coretta, then Vicky.
So what we normally do is, as you were saying, we have to write a full proposal, and that proposal has to outline, when we present the project, it has to outline what the cost is going to be, what roles would be needed, how many volunteers we would need to have to produce a positive result for that project. And also, I don't know how big your club is. Our club is really, really, really small. So a lot of times when it comes down to some projects, we have that issue right now with retaining and retention with members. And a lot of times you'll get new people that come in, they have great ideas, but they're going to be very costly for the club. And a lot of times you'll have where you don't have enough people that want to actively participate in that particular project. So then, yes, it does become discouraging. And I'm speaking from experience. When you have, that drive to say, okay, this can work, but then you have those people that are saying, well, no, it's not going to work. And when you have it all outlined out, and like she was, like you were just saying a moment ago, have a full outline of it. When we required the proposal, I was required to put all of that information in there. And then they had to look at it. And during the board meeting, you take it to the board has to look at it and say, okay, now I have questions about this. So I don't know if you've already done so or not, but you may want to consider your concerns, putting them in writing and saying, okay, here's my concern. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this project, but here are where my concerns lie with this project. So how can we address these concerns and still have a positive outcome? And that way you're not just saying, no, this is not going to work. You're giving them the opportunity to say, okay, this is what we can do. This is how this would be handled. This will be handled this way. And they're having the opportunity to fully explain the project without having a negative connotation going into it.
And I was gonna say basically the same thing as what Coretta did. Make sure that when you build your checklist of benefits to the club, etc., make sure there's also the potential issues you're gonna run into. Because in addition to just writing down the facts, we're gonna need this much money, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. Make sure that you document or talk about what you think the benefits are going to be, not only to the charitable organization, but the benefits to your club and the possible issues you could run into along the way. And maybe that's something that a more senior member can work one-on-one with this new person to help them realize that there might be potential concerns or potential issues that need to be brought up and talked about with the group as a whole.
And sometimes, if a club is very flush, they might be okay of spending $5,000 on a project and not getting back any community attention, because they think, oh, this organization will do its best. But mostly clubs don't. Clubs want to invest money and time and get something back. So I think it's just getting a new member to think that way, to say we're not about just giving away money, because we can do that as a donor without joining a club. It's more about our community engagement and who we are as a club, and what our service mission is, what your service ideas are. So are we achieving what we want to achieve with service? Because you can do the worst, if nothing comes out of it, are we still okay as a club with that? You can even ask that question. If we're afraid that this is just money that will go somewhere and we have no say over it, are we okay? Will that still be good enough? And if it's not, then you want to prevent any of those negative, any of the risks that you see.
I must have misunderstood, because I thought she said that everybody had done that process and everybody had agreed on it.
Mhm.
I must have misunderstood that. I'm sorry.
I think, Rebecca, this is a great learning opportunity for your club because you have a lot of new members, 10 or 12, something like that, who are pretty brand new to Altrusa. So this is a great opportunity to have your entire club talk through what the process is for a new project. And if you have any older members that remember from some number of years ago, a new project being started, I know you've got the furniture one and a couple other ones. If there's one that's an old project that went through a vetting process before it got going and someone can speak to that, they could share how it used to be done, because sometimes over time when some of our longer term members leave a club and you have a bunch of new folks, you don't know necessarily some of the processes that used to happen. And this could be a good opportunity to talk through actually what we should be doing is just filling out this form and talking through it as a committee and a club so that we can make sure that all the different things have been discussed and that this can be nice and strong and have a positive impact like we want it to, not as a negative thing, not to get rid of the project, just to make sure again that it's vetted on all levels and everyone feels comfortable with it. And you've got so many new members that they would learn that process too and carry it forward to other ideas.
Yeah, it feels like an opportunity to strengthen the club, if you do that, because you'll do it for every project. So you invite new ideas too, because there might be another member wanting to suggest something, and then you can try the process and repeat it.
I can bring this up at the President's Council meeting too, not with your club in particular, but just, spring and fall are great times to get projects going. We often start to think about what we're going to be doing. So I'll bring that up at the President's Council meeting just as a reminder for using some of these processes to evaluate things as we develop them too.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful that the leadership in the club understand that this process should be followed. And that that's not necessarily putting up a roadblock to a new member, but it's going through a vetting process, which all of our projects should go through.
I want to say something about the vetting process. We just went through that in my club in Hermiston for a fall project. And Sue Daggett, I don't know how I'd survive without her. We had all these things on there, and then we kind of, all the positives that could happen. And then we kind of did a devil's advocate, take each one of those subjects and what if that doesn't work? And what if that doesn't work? How do we adjust? And because it's for Halloween, the weather was the biggest. Now, actually, we have no control over weather at an outdoor event, but we got to be ready to have our umbrellas and do this and do that. And it was a really fascinating way to look at projects. It does work.
I might toss out if any of your clubs have a document like what you just talked about, Tammy, maybe people could email them to me and I might just go ahead and share those with our club presidents as a couple sample documents as we talk about this project. Vetting process, we'll have a different name for it, but that would be something that we can share just because some clubs do routinely do that and other clubs don't. And so we can share a resource like that just as an example of how to evaluate things before you go ahead.
And I think there's one on the international website.
Yes, I was going to say that's where she got it, was the international website.
Yeah, I just meant one that's filled in that has that has some information on it. I can absolutely show a blank one too, but I thought it could be interesting to just show a couple that that have information on there to show kind of what it looks like when there's pros and cons, so to speak, or different factors to evaluate.
Anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Dina, you've been awfully silent.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Good. I'm sitting here learning.
Oh, okay.
Maybe those Albany people can have a challenge for us. There's a few Albany people sending over from Corvallis.
You're calling us challenging?
I would say Albany has overcome all kinds of great challenges and is thriving.
No, it's just there's the rivalry between Corvallis and Albany.
That actually came up at a meeting from a guest that was sitting next to me because Julie was on the other side of me.
Oh.
Yeah.
We do have one or two other slides at the very end. Tor, would you like me to, and Bettina, do you want me to screen share to show that?
Sure.
Last slide. Let's see here. Oh, is it going to take me all the way back to the end? Nope. Here we go. That should work. Okay, so we did that one. And you already did the club president's handbook resource.
Yep. There's additional leadership resources. There's past presidents, there's your past committee chairs, district and international committee members are there to support you. And I really think, you know, if you have heard somebody from another district talk about something and you kind of felt a connection with them, seek them out. You know, sometimes you get great ideas from somebody that's not in your club or not in your district, and you know, you build a friendship along the way. There's outside of Altrusa, you know, there's the Altrusa websites, and there's tons of information on the international as well as the District 12 website. But, you know, there's just tons of leadership books out there. There's, you know, so many great newsletters that you can sign up for. I'm in 2 or 3 of them. And one of mine that I love is James Clear with Atomic Habits. And his is a very easy, you know, he just gives you some thoughts and some quotes, and it's a easy, you know, 10-minute read, if that. But there's TED Talks, you know, in the age of technology, there's so much that you can resource online. And I just encourage you, not for Altrusa, but for you, the individual, and your personal journey, whether you want to call it for leadership or just for life. It's just so important. Interesting quote that I heard today was, your first workout will be bad. Your first podcast will be bad. Your first speech will be bad. Your first video will be bad. Your first anything will be bad, but you can't make your 100th without making your first. So put your ego aside and start.
That's great.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight and sharing, and especially those in the different time zone and staying up so late to be with us, and we appreciate you. So this is the final Amazon gift card drawing for the District 12 members. And if you have attended all 3, your name will go in for a 50% discount on conference. And the drawing will be on March 29th at 10 a.m. via Zoom. Thank you all for coming.
I'd also like to say a very special thank you to all 4 of our presenters tonight, Bettina, Tor, Janet, and Vicky, but a extra special thank you to Bettina and Tor, who are our District 12 leadership co-chairs. They did this leadership series last year with different content. They adapted it to make it fresh for this year, so it's new content for January, February, and March of this year. In addition to reading synopsis going out and book club kinds of things going out, and fall leadership workshop along the way, and all kinds of development for our members to grow as leaders. So Tor and Bettina, thank you very, very much for your leadership on leadership development, and also Janet and Vicky for your contributions tonight and your input into our district too. You've done an awesome job.
Thank you all very much.
You.
Hi.
If anyone wants to participate in the Amazon gift card drawing, that's a District 12 member, feel free to go to the homepage of the District 12 website, and right under the photos, there's a link there that you can get the link for the drawing, and also the couple questions to answer and to give us any feedback on future leadership topics. And thanks everyone for joining in tonight.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you, conference.
Thank you.